I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda, and you're listening to Hard NOC Life.
Well, it's the NOC in full color, you see me? The Hard NOC Life, comics, movies, and TV, yeah.
Welcome to Hard NOC Life. I am Keith Chow.
I'm Britney Monet.
Hi, I'm Dominic Ma.
Hey guys, it's almost March. We are on the precipice of the Batman. But before we get into it, I did want to acknowledge what's crazy about what's going on in the world nowadays is that the 21st century, the 2020s has decided we're just going to play again, Sam, the greatest hits of the 20th century. So not only did we decide, let's just redo a global pandemic, why not start up the Cold War again?
Oh, geez, is that the schedule? Is that because...
I mean, we
we
skipped like 30 years before we could get to the Cold War. But or land
that's
war in Europe. Maybe it
at.
was like, let's do the global pandemic and let's do the land war in Europe.
Because we had the Spanish flu, and then we got into a bunch of world wars. And if we're just rebooting the 20th century, that would be the next on the docket. Great.
Basically.
Fantastic. Thanks, Keith.
No problem.
I hope there's not that much symmetry involved. I just thought the main new data point was that Putin's a little bit crazier than we had anticipated, than people thought.
Yeah.
Because people are like, this, Ukraine-Russia situation has been complicated, and we don't really understand how it's been brewing over the years. But I think that, the new thing is just Putin's crazier than we thought.
And we thought he was pretty crazy already. It's hard to wrap your head around any other the trivial things that we typically talk about. I know, because I saw on Twitter people were like, maybe Warner Brothers should just not release the Batman in Russia. It's like, that'll teach them.
That's our offensive strategy.
I don't know. I don't really know what's going on to fully understand how to navigate even talking about the situation, but I just know anytime there is war and bombs are being dropped over cities, unfortunately innocent people and civilians get caught in the crosshairs, and that's just always unfortunate. So hopefully it does cease, because it's just not fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to put a bow in it, when you see a lot of journalists kind of talking about how badass the Ukrainians are, you see a bunch of civilians just armed to the teeth, ready to fight for their country. And it's not lost on me as well that when those same freedom fighters are brown, it's never covered with such triumphalism. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not look how badass these folks are.
Yeah. I mean, because frickin' arming the Ukraine populace, that is some Red Dawn shit going on right now.
Right.
Except that the Ukraine is the country being invaded. But that is the story of, we're just citizens, and we're all going to get guns somehow, and we're going to, defend our libraries. And, it's amazing.
I don't know. It's seen, black refugees from, Ukraine trying to get into Poland, and they're being denied access. So it's just, I don't know, it's sad, just this whole entire situation. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway,
and speaking of a character who lives entirely in that contradictory mode of what real life versus fantasy life, moral heroism would be, there's another Batman movie.
Another Batman movie. Robert Pattinson is the 7th live-action Batman. Let's run it down. If we start with Adam West, because I'm not going to count no shake to the serials from the 40s, but we're going to start the modern Batman live-action with Adam West, Michael Keaton, Val Kilmer,
George Clooney,
Christian Bale, Ben Affleck, Robert Pattinson, number 7. You could also count
Kevin Conroy.
And Kevin Conroy
you could count Kevin Conroy
because he did live action.
Because he did live action in Crisis.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes, because I know there might be someone who's going to be like, Kevin Conroy only did voiceover. No, he did a live action.
He was a live action Batman in Crisis. And then David Mazouz from Gotham put on the bat suit for a hot second at the end of Gotham. So
I need to finish that show.
Oh, sorry, spoiler.
No,
David Mazouz becomes Batman.
I figured it would end with him becoming Batman, so...
Bruce Wayne is Batman. I mean, if we're going to count the live-action Bruce Wayne, my man shows up in Joker, too. So, there's a lot of Bruce Waynes. But Robert Pattinson is the latest and the greatest to play Bruce Wayne Batman. This movie has had such an interesting road to the big screen. Yes. Because this movie that we're getting on March 4th started out as a DCEU Ben Affleck Batman movie. That was the original The Batman. And a lot can happen in the 5 years since that was announced to where we are now, where we have a Batman movie that's wholly disconnected from the DCEU, if that even matters.
Well, it makes it interesting. Now it's an outlier, because we've gotten in the habit, especially with all the Marvel movies, of tracking all the connections, the references, the Twitter rumors that lead to how is this connected to the larger universe. So the Batman movie, however it started, how it ended up right now is a movie that is not specifically connected to the larger universe. So I think that's really interesting, and I think that means why we're excited about it. If we're interested in this Batman movie or not, it's because of the filmmaking and not necessarily, the references or who might show up. I think that's very interesting.
It's funny how we've come full circle, right? Because that was the thing about Marvel, and then, DC kind of following in their footsteps to try to create an interconnected universe. That, like, the knock against DC was always, like, their stuff's never connected, right? Because we had, like, in the time span of the MCU, we've had the Dark Knight movies and then the DCEU movie. Like, we've already had disconnected DC movies within this time span. Like, you could argue how much Birds of Prey is really a DCEU movie, right? Yeah. And so, and Joker stood alone as well. Like, DC was never, as much as they tried to follow the cinematic universe template, they've always stayed disconnected. I've come around on that because there was a period of time where I was like, I would like a connected DC universe, but then I was like, they should embrace the multiverse and just have all these different interpretations. That's kind of where we're headed now anyway, right?
Yes. I agree. I feel like the problem now, so many other franchises, not just DC though, like, I feel like they are all trying to copy the Marvel machine and do the interconnected thing. But I feel like some of them are so excited to get to the interconnected stuff that they don't do the building that Marvel has done. And that's why people forget. It's like, no, they didn't just, like, start with Captain America Civil War and was like, oh, cool, we have this interconnected universe. They built it up from Iron Man 1 and all the movies in between. So it's like, it's a long road to do that if you're going to do that. And I feel like some people don't have the patience to build up to that. Like, yeah, it might take you 10 years to get to where Marvel's at because it took them 10 years to do all of it. That big major, what we got to Infinity War, like, it took 10 years to get there.
Yeah.
So, and I just feel like you don't have to have interconnected stories to tell good stories too. Just because Marvel is dominating does not mean you can't tell good stories. And I feel like Batman has always been just a very cool... We all know Batman has been a very cool character. He's fun, he's gritty, he's dark, and then he can also be campy, and it works. Like, Batman can do so many different genres, and he works. And I feel like it's just embrace the different Batmans.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, Batman has always been more in the James Bond mold in the sense that, like, they don't have to be connected. And it's always interesting to see the different actors, different directors take on that character. And that's always been the limitation of the connected universe, is that you could never really stand alone. You always had to, like, weave a story point or a casting or this or that to make it fit in.
Yeah, eventually it has to tie in, and I agree. Like, it's fun. I don't know. I'm excited to see Robert Pattinson as Batman. I've liked him since, I saw him as Cedric Diggory all those years ago. I know we don't like J.K. Rowling anymore, but, I remember seeing him like, oh, he's cool. And then when I heard he was going to be playing Edward, I was like, oh, I never got into those books. And then I read those books for him. So Robert Pattinson is another actor that I've gone up and beyond to follow their career.
All the clowning that his casting got, I mean, it just put him in rarefied air of other Batman castings, right? Like, if you think of Heath Ledger, if you think of Ben Affleck, you think of Michael Keaton. Anytime an actor gets cast in a Batman movie, the fan base is always like...
Yeah, Michael Keaton was nobody's first choice. Well, that came a little out of nowhere.
Yeah, it was out of left field. If the internet existed in 1988...
They'd be like,
they would have,
Mr.
like...
Mom?
Pitched... Yeah. And that's exactly what the non-internet fan base was already... bitching about when the Burton movies were originally announced. And the same thing, as much as the Snyder Bros love Ben Affleck, that announcement of Ben Affleck was met with dismissal and laughter from everyone, not just like...
I don't even remember what I thought about that.
I think Ben Affleck was perfectly good. I don't think those movies are good, but I think he's perfectly good.
I mean, ultimately, he was a good Batman. I think ultimately he was a good Batman. And I was down for a Ben. I thought it made sense. My issue with the Snyder movies was that, and I've stated this many times, again, going back to the connected universe, if they wanted us to care about Batman and Superman meeting, they should have had a Batman we knew meet Superman.
Yes.
That said, Affleck as Batman, divorced from my misgivings of that series of films, standing alone, he was a great Batman. He looked like Batman. He moved like Batman. He acted like Batman, except for the murder. But then again,
that was just a function of the story,
right? But then again, my favorite Batman, Michael Keaton, strapped a bomb to a clown's pants and threw him down a sewer. So like, he wasn't opposed to like murdering people either. That wasn't Batman Returns. I mean, he threw the Joker off a building. He had machine guns on the Batmobile. So, like, yeah, when the Snyder Bros come at me for like being hypocritical about complaining about murder Batman, I can't deny that Keaton had some bloodlust when he was Batman.
But anyway, winding our way back to Pattinson. I mean, it is all speculative at this point.
He actually has a good career, though.
Yeah, no, he's a great actor. He's going to be a great actor.
And he just looks really good in the suit, okay? I think as the evolution of the suit is really making progress in our times. I don't think it's going back. The mask is just looking better and better on people. I thought it looked better on Affleck than it did on every previous Batmans. And the Pattinson's Bat mask looks really cool because they shaved it. They shaved off the cheek part, so it doesn't wrap all.
It's all jaw.
Right. It doesn't wrap around the sides of his head in that weird way that just looks weird in the Bale movies.
He should be jaw.
The Bale one, like. Looking back, the Bale cowl is probably like the worst.
It just looks really weird at some point.
It does look weird. As much as I love the interrogation scene between Joker and Batman in Dark Knight, like there are some angles where Bale's face just looks really weird. I love that you can't see his eyes and like they're just like these white dots in his cowl. But yeah, he's the little mouth opening for Bale's. He's already got like the weakest chin of all of the Batmans. Really, like he doesn't have that square jaw that like Clooney.
With weird points on it.
Right, and then the cowl just accentuated that. But yeah, Pattinson's cowl is he's and I love the stitching. It really does look handmade. Because this is an early Batman who's, kind of like stitching his own costume together. It looks like SWAT gear, kind of Frankenstein together, which is kind of cool. Versus like, the rubber.
But yeah. So, I mean, with context, we should add that like they're having it both ways this year. This isn't the only Batman movie that's coming out this year, and the other one is probably going to be the Flash, which will have a significant Michael Keaton Batman part of it. So they are having their extended universe interconnected story in the same year.
And Affleck is in that one.
Yeah,
Affleck and Keaton are both in that.
And I'm sure this was not the plan, by the way, when you spoke of being a long road. I'm sure it's not the plan to have the two Batman movies come out in the same year.
Right. And then, I mean, if Batgirl gets finished, that might even come out at the end of the year. So we may have 3 Batman movies at the end of the day. Because Keaton's in Batgirl. Right. Keaton's in Batgirl. Which is, again, a weird... Like, Batgirl is kind of set in the DCEU because J.K. Simmons is playing Commissioner Gordon in Batgirl, and he was the Gordon from Justice League. But there was some leaked photos from the set of Keaton's Batman with Simmons as Gordon, kind of like in a flashback scene working together. So like, did Barry fuck up the timeline and now Keaton was the Batman all along in the DCEU? Maybe. Or is Simmons playing like a young version of Pat Hingle from the '89 Batman movie?
But also like, J.K. Simmons has the same problem when it comes to Spider-Man playing.
He's the Nexus being in 2 universes.
Because he's not even supposed to be Tobey Maguire's J.J. Jameson. He's like he's just the one for Tom too. So it's just like.
Yeah.
And Jameson never showed up in Amazing, right?
No,
I don't think.
Yeah. I think they had his name. He
was referred to in one line.
Yeah, like in a byline, like when they show newspaper. I think they had his name Yeah. But I don't think
they mentioned this guy is not paying me very well for my photographs, and that's all Garfield says of J. Jonah Jameson either. I think. Sorry. Yes. Anyway.
So you mentioned the long and winding road. So like when the Batman was first announced, it was announced in 2017. And that was before Justice League, the Joss Whedon version of Justice League came out. It was this whole thing where, if you recall, when Justice League was coming out, there was this big announcement at Comic-Con of like all of the directors and all of the movies that they were going to do. So we had James Wan was going to do Aquaman. We had Ben Affleck was going to do The Batman. Rick Famuyiwa was about to do The Flash. And Patty Jenkins was on stage to be the Wonder Woman. So like all of the main characters that were introduced in BVS that were going to be in the Justice League all had these movies that were in the pipeline. But there was this big Comic-Con panel where you had Famuyiwa, Wan, Affleck, and Jenkins on stage together with Zack Snyder, just kind of like talk about the future of the DC movies. And of course, like Patty Jenkins went on to make Wonder Woman and the sequel. James Wan went on to make Aquaman, but the Flash movie got delayed and delayed and delayed. Famuyiwa eventually got off the project.
I personally think they didn't like that he was trying to... He liked probably what they were doing on the TV show, The Flash, having a black iris and having more, you know, people of color basically involved in Barry's story. And I don't think they were vibing with that, honestly. I feel like that's part of why he got cut from it. Because if you've seen the movie Dope, I feel like he could handle the teenage, like...
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was... The Rick Famuyiwa Flash movie was the one I was the most excited for, honestly.
Me too. Because I had just seen Dope around the time they announced it, so I was like, oh, he's gonna have fun with the Flash, especially when they announced like who's supposed to be, you know, Barry and Iris. I was like, oh yeah, he's gonna have such like a blast like doing this. And then they dropped him. Like, it has to be like diversity issues that he wanted to push, that they were like, no, we're not doing that.
Which is wild, because like Candace's Iris on The Flash is one of the most popular aspects of that show, and they had already cast Kiersey Clemons as Iris in Justice League. You know, of course, you know, Joss Whedon being a prick cut all of her scenes out, which we eventually saw again in Zack Snyder's. And you know, at the end of the day, it wasn't like she was in the movie that much to begin with.
I know, but she didn't have that big of a scene, but...
And then Ben Affleck, of course, was announced to like not only star in the Batman, he was going to direct, and everyone knows he's an Oscar-winning director of several films, and he's a great director. So I was excited for Affleck's Batman. The whole post-credit scene of Justice League was leading up to it, because Joe Manganiello was cast as Deathstroke, and it was going to be a movie about Batman and Deathstroke,
which we all want to see. Let's be real. That sounds like a cool concept. But
yeah, and that's the that was what the Batman was supposed to be. Of course, part of the reason that Affleck eventually dropped out, he first dropped out as director, right? But he was still going to star, and that's when they brought on Matt Reeves. And then eventually Affleck was like working on the script. Affleck was going to write, direct, and star in the Batman while he was going through like a divorce and alcoholism. So like, no wonder.
Apparently, yeah, it put him through this whole mental ringer.
Yeah, absolutely. And he said, I think on the Howard Stern show or something, that like he would have died if he kept playing Batman, because just like how low he was in his life, because like he was battling alcoholism, going through a divorce, and going through all of like the shit on top of the pressure to write, direct, and star in the Batman.
And I feel like people don't realize when you live in these characters, and Batman's a heavy character to live in. So if you yourself are going through a lot of, you know, stuff like that, I feel like it's that, I feel like that would have done him in.
Yeah, it's a good point. You don't want your artistic mind to be just living in Gotham City all the time and dreaming up ways to destroy crime at night.
I mean, and you can kind of even see it, like, when you watch the Joss Whedon Justice League versus the Zack Snyder Justice League, and even, you know, the reshoots for the Zack Snyder Justice League, like, Affleck looked much better. Like, maybe not, I hate the whole, you know, I'm gonna fucking kill you Joker stuff, but, like, the scene in his apartment with the Martian Manhunter, Affleck looks really good. Like, he looks in shape, he looks like normal again. The Affleck in the Joss Whedon reshoots looks like he's going through the ringer. You know what I mean? Like, he looks like he doesn't want to be there. He's just like going through some shit.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, no one looks like they're having a good time in the Whedon reshoots. Just
right. I mean, like one of the like pastimes I did when the Snyder Cut came out was go through all of like the side by sides of like scenes that were reshot for Justice League, which the fans call it, and the biggest difference, of course, is just you know, Affleck's whole demeanor. So yeah, I mean, as much as I'm interested in what the Batman would have been under Affleck, I am a fan of Ben Affleck, right? And I'm glad that he was able to get his life together, you know, and playing Batman. As much as people want him to play Batman, if that would have like screwed him up, I'm glad he stepped away, you know. And he's in a better headspace so he could come back and do the reshoots for Justice League and do I don't know how big his role in The Flash is, but he came back to do The Flash in a better headspace. So, and he was quoted as saying his experience on The Flash is the best time he's ever had playing Batman.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's probably more also lighthearted, and he's also just like, he's probably in a better place mentally to handle playing a character who is very dark,
Yeah. And so Matt Reeves was brought on to direct originally Affleck's version of the Batman, but as that started to fall apart, Matt Reeves took over script writing, came up with the story, and he wanted to tell a story ultimately disconnected, especially after Affleck dropped out, totally disconnected from the DCEU. Very much a film noir inspired detective story. And I've said for as long as I can remember that I don't want a $300 million Batman movie. I want like a small, like Batman has to solve a crime, track down a serial killer. And that's what we're getting. Like all accounts.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
It looks like Seven.
Yeah, you're right. It looks like a David Fincher Batman movie.
Yeah.
And that's what we're getting. And the budget on the Batman, maybe I don't know if this includes all of the reshoots, like COVID-induced reshoots, but the budget on the Batman was $100 million. That, of course, $100 million is still a lot of money. Dominic, if someone gave you $100 million to make a movie, you'd be like, holy shit. But for this type of film, $100 million budget is basically an indie.
They are typically going to 150, 200.
More or more, right? Like Endgame costs like $1 billion. You know what I mean? Like the reason they need to make $1 billion is because it costs $1 billion to make.
But to the thing you just said, I think it's be careful what you wish for, because they took you a little bit to heart in the sense that they made that Joker movie, which had a very modest budget for some things. So out of the ratio of budget to profit, the Joker movie is still like the most successful shit ever, because it made $1 billion and had an under $50 million budget. Or is that like?
Yeah, it was very low, very low.
But of course, budget and everything was but that was a case study in Joker. But yeah, good point. It looks scaled down. And again, I get back to like, without the references or the big cameo appearances, we have to be drawn in by the style or the filmmaking. What does this look like? And what are the things that are drawing us in? I'm just interested.
We're not that far off from the Nolan movies. And one of the calling cards of the Nolan trilogy, the Dark Knight trilogy, was that it was this grounded, realistic take on Batman. Because, you have to remember, before Batman Begins, the last taste people had of Batman, Brittany, I know you love the movie, but a lot of people didn't, was Batman and Robin, where it went full circle back to like the campy Adam West. But again, big budget, kind of like Joel Schumacher coined the term toyetic, which meant like we want vehicles and suits that like we can sell toys. And so Batman Begins, the revelation of that film was, we're going to go away from the spectacle and make this like, we're going to explain every single piece of the Batsuit. Like the ears are actually like radios, and like everything is like got a reason. The Batman is definitely following in the footsteps of like realistic, grounded Batman. Because you could argue like the Snyder Batman went more back into the fantastic. He's fighting aliens and everything's CGI. Is it too soon to go back to like a Nolan-y version of that? Because like the Batman seems like something that would, Matt Reeves was quoted saying like Superman can't exist in his version of the Batman because it's like there's no way to make Superman, the fantastic nature of Superman as a character wouldn't make sense in his Gotham, which is basically verbatim of what Nolan used to say about the Dark Knight trilogy, why they could never connect it to Man of Steel, which I think is still, I call bullshit.
But it upsets the whole world. It upsets the cosmology of the world.
But the whole point of Man of Steel is that the arrival of Zod upsets the whole cosmology. Like the first three quarters of Man of Steel was like, it's the real world. And that's what I found was so intriguing about Man of Steel, was that it was an alien invasion movie, And that's, but anyway, I'm not here to relitigate why Christian Bale should have been in Batman versus Superman. But no, but are we, is it too soon to redo realistic Batman?
I see, I don't know if my like affinity for Robert Pattinson and like emo sad boys and Batman just are making me like, I'm really on board with this version. Because when I first saw the trailer for like the Nolan Batman, I was like, I don't think I'm gonna like this. And I saw Batman Beginnings and I didn't like it. I'm not gonna lie, I did not like that movie.
Why are we friends, Brittany?
I don't know. I just thought Christian Bale was a miscast. I will to this day.
Because reasonable minds can differ.
I just think Christian Bale's not Batman.
Yeah, that's fair.
He's not Batman or Bruce Wayne, and I know there's some people like, well, he's really good at one of them. Like, no, he's not good at any of them. I just didn't like him. And so I do like the movie The Dark Knight, but that's more because I think Heath Ledger carries that movie. And then, I did kind of like The Dark Knight Rises, but I think I've told the story. My one brother would like play the movie every night, so like, and it was at our old house, and we had thin walls, so I could hear Tom Hardy's Bane through my walls, like, no survivors, like, every night.
Oh my god.
So I used to like that movie. So the whole Nolan, like, franchise to me as a whole is like, I can't with it. I don't.
Some people got really into the Bane voice, but if you were coming through your walls every night, that seems like
Can you
a
imagine?
little
No,
unhealthy fixation.
he watched it every night. I am not joking. He would watch it to go to sleep, and then even my other brother, like, because I used to share a room at the time, he was just like, I used to like that movie. Now I hate it. Like, we don't watch that movie at all anymore because of our brother who would watch it all the time.
And that represents something which is like, we were all getting sort of overexposed to at that point. Dark Knight Rises was like too much of whatever The Dark Knight did. It was just overstuffed in all sorts of ways. Too loud, too big, too everything. So we hit a kind of Batman peak threshold there of what Nolan was doing. That's what I would argue.
Yeah, I don't know, but I feel like because it does have more of an indie movie vibe than the Dark Knight trilogy has, I feel like I'm gonna like it more because also I've seen a lot of Robert's like indie stuff.
I still need to see the Lighthouse.
Oh, that one's good.
Yeah, I don't know if that's streaming anywhere, is it?
I don't know, but I know I rented it on Amazon Prime and it was very fun. Him and William Dafoe. Yeah.
I mean, even when Willem Dafoe hosted Saturday Night Live a couple weeks ago, he even made like a point, like, people want him to be the Joker. And can you imagine if he's cast as the Joker in the next Batman movie?
Hey, there's a thought.
Chaos.
Against Robert Pattinson?
Oh, that'd be chaos. But I like his... Did you hear about his idea about how he would want to play the Joker? He said he would like to actually be a Joker against Joaquin Phoenix, saying that he's the real Joker.
Oh, and like do a 3 Jokers type
And
thing.
like causing chaos and like who's the actual one. I'm like, now that would be fun because,
Yeah, because in the comics they had that 3 Jokers storyline, and it's
yeah.
good. That's a good pool, Willem Dafoe.
I mean, I guess, we live in a disconnected world now, because I was going to say he's Volko in the DCEU, but I forgot this is not DCEU, so like he could definitely bring him in for any potential Batman sequel. But let's get into like this particular movie, because we kind of talked about the winding road. Matt Reeves was brought on. He of course directed the Planet of the Apes movies, and he had a very distinct take. And I think I love your point. His take is essentially, let's make this an indie film noir crime movie. Which is what we're getting. That's what separates it from the Nolan films, right? Because the Nolan films, even though they were this grounded take on Batman, where it's not this fantastical, Tim Burton, Zack Snyder take, it was still a blockbuster. It was still a spectacle, right? It was all about, like,
for sure,
this giant, they were giant movies. That's the thing about Nolan. He knows how to make giant blockbusters. This movie does not feel like a giant blockbuster. That's why, like, opening in March isn't weird, because March is a weird month normally to open a Batman movie. Batman movies come out in June. They come out in July. They come out in the peak of summer. This is a March 4th release for a Batman movie. It's wild. But because it does have this indie flavor, right? Like, the first trailer is playing like it's not even a slow version. Like, typically that's the indie movie trailer trick. It's like, let's play a slow down version of like a grunge song. And they're like, no, Matt Reeves like, let's find the slow grunge song, and played Something in the Way by Kurt Cobain.
Yeah, it's the actual Nirvana song. Yeah.
Essential Nirvana song. And the reason that he chose that song is that Kurt Cobain was an influence on how they're approaching Bruce Wayne in this movie. And then the casting is fantastic. Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, or an early version of Catwoman. John Turturro as Carmine Falcone. Colin Farrell in like tons of prosthetics as the Penguin. And of course Paul Dano as the Riddler.
Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner
Gordon, or Lieutenant Gordon. Like, the cast feels like an indie movie. Like, if you didn't put the Batman on it and just said, like, Matt Reeves is directing a film noir thriller with Robert Pattinson, Zoe Kravitz, Jeffrey Wright, Paul Dano, and Colin Farrell.
Yeah,
You'd be like,
it sounds like an indie / like kind of.
What, is A24 putting that movie out?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Well, I mean, I'm still reserving judgment. I mean, judgment. I don't want to be like justice.
Vengeance. That's how do you feel about the cast? I feel vengeance.
Yeah. I don't want to be like, oh, I love these people, and then, rather see the movie. It's just when you put elevated expectations on something, you like end up going all these weird places. Just
Yeah.
But can we talk about Gordon for a second? I was just thinking about, it'll be really interesting to see Jeffrey Wright as Gordon, because Gordon's this kind of interesting part of the Batman universe. I mean, he's kind of a nerd, basically, right? I mean, he's not like the ultra tough cop. He's always been this kind of grandfatherly guy who wears glasses.
That's Jeffrey Wright's kind of like nerdy.
Yeah, I mean, I think of Jeffrey Wright on like Westworld, like he's as Bernard, like he's very much like the kind of like demure, kind of like.
That's what I mean. He seems thoughtful, and that goes with the Gordon thing well. I mean, even Gary Oldman's Gordon was a weird one, right? I mean,
well, that was what was like so against cast for like Gary Oldman, because Gary Oldman's always like the over the top villain, right? That's why like his cast, going back to like Harry Potter, his casting of Sirius Black was so perfect, because you assume Sirius Black is evil, but he's really a nice guy. And so when you see Gary Oldman, you just assume he's evil because he's Gary fucking Oldman. But that's what was so like wild about him being in Batman Begins, because he's just like a straight, honest cop the whole movie. So but Jeffrey Wright definitely, like, I think he's more typical of a Gordon casting than Gary Oldman was against type. I feel like Jeffrey Wright is very much like leading into the type of character who Jim Gordon would be. But who knows, right? Like, I don't know the plot of this movie. I haven't seen the movie yet. I know it's been out and there have been press screenings, and some folks on the Nerds of Color, like, by the time you listen to this podcast, I think Mike's review will be up on the Nerds of Color, which is going to be a bitch for me to edit because I don't want to read it,
right?
Because I don't see the movie until Tuesday. But anyway, I don't know the stories, but who knows? Gordon could be a bad guy. Like it sounds like the Waynes aren't great people. Like there's been a reverse in how storytellers depict the Wayne family over the last few years, not just in the movies but in the comics too. Like the Waynes were not these like goody two shoes that we've always been led to believe.
I think genuinely that suits a lot better because, like, them not being good people makes it more like it gives more motivation for why someone would just like I don't know, shoot them over pearls.
Like, that's one thing Matt Reeves has said. There will be no Wayne murder scene in this movie. So, like, that's one spoiler that Reeves was like...
That's fine. I feel like at this point, unless you're, like, a 5-year-old who knows nothing about Batman, like, everyone knows that's
well, that's
what
the complaint, right?
Batman.
That's the complaint. Like, we don't need to see pearls in the alley. The Joker movie even had a Wayne murder scene. Like, that was when I threw my popcorn. Because I was like, really? In this movie, we need a Wayne murder scene? But... we're not getting it in the Batman, thankfully. Matt Reeves has said we don't need to see that yet again.
Yeah, we don't need that.
Did you ever see the movie The Town?
Yeah, the Ben Affleck movie.
Ben Affleck's movie?
Because that's what I feel like it has that essence to it. And then I forgot that Ben was actually supposed to be, like, working on it. So I wonder if, like, he still has some story credits. Because it does feel like the movie The Town in a way.
Yeah, no, it's good you mentioned that because I think that's what... Ben Affleck is good at those atmospheric crime dramas. He made The Town, which is a cool crime drama.
I love that movie.
With good guys and bad guys. Made Gone, Baby Gone. And so I think that's why they were on the track to make this kind of lower key detective story, as you say. And then, whatever they got off of that track, but they said, but Matt Reeves is also good at that kind of thing. I mean, I don't know everything about what he does, but, Cloverfield is cool. And the Planet of the Apes movies are really well done. I'm not a big Planet of the Apes person. In fact, Planet of the Apes is mysterious to me because it's like that nerd fandom that, like, must be somebody's favorite thing because they made, like, 12 of those movies. But I have no idea whose favorite thing it is. So the fact that... but I saw them anyway, and they're...
And he only did the 2 sequels, right? He didn't do the first... reboot. He did like the Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, I don't think he did the first one, but I think I only saw.
Right.
Ended up seeing the second, third ones, and they just created the world very well. And sorry, we're overusing that phrase, but it was like the atmosphere and the cities. Like you really felt that like you were in a world with like super intelligent, angry apes around, and whatever that viscerality of it, I don't know. I think it seems to be evident in the trailers for the Batman.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap it up here and just each of us can share, what is the one thing you're most looking forward to, or you find the most interesting about the Batman going into? Because I'm assuming we're all going to be seeing it this week, and we'll probably be talking about it next week.
Trying to.
But what's the thing you're most looking forward to or anticipating about seeing this movie?
Robert Pattinson making fanboys realize that he is the ultimate millennial actor.
I think that's happening. I think that's, like, one thing that I've been doing the last, I've been trying to like tamp down, to Dominic's point, my hype for the movie, because I'm a Batman guy. Like, you can see behind me. That's my entire life I've been a Batman guy, and this is the first Batman movie I haven't been like just chomping at the bit to see. Not because I'm like worried about it. I just feel like I can't go in with these like super high expectations, or not even high expectations. Just like I can't just go in like frothing at the mouth. I just have to kind of like chill out and just let it wash over me. You know what I mean?
Right. But that's interesting. That thought process is the expectation, because there's less expectations. You still feel good about this as one of your favorite characters. I mean, there's no expectation that something terribly awful is going to.
Yeah. I mean, because that's the thing. Like, I had a friend who used to say, like, Batman movies are like pizza. Even when they're bad, they're good. Like, there's just something indelible about that character to me. Like, I'm with Britney. I've come around on the Schumacher films. I wrote a thing a couple years ago about, like, we need to reassess the Schumacher movies and not just dismiss them as, trash or whatever. I think and I think in the light of Schumacher's passing, I think there's been a reassessment of the Schumacher films in like the pop culture zeitgeist. I'm not going in saying like I have low expectations or I think it's going to be bad, and that's why I just don't want to have like, I'm not watching every clip. I'm not watching every trailer. I did download the score, but I purposefully am not looking at the track titles. Like, I'm just letting it play in the background, because I was burned.
They often manage to give away the plot of those track titles.
I was burned 20 years ago when the Phantom Menace soundtrack came out. I didn't even buy the CD yet. I picked up the CD, looked at the track list, and like track 19 was Qui-Gon's funeral, and I was like, oh, I guess Liam Neeson dies in this fucking movie. Like, thanks, John Williams.
Indeed.
So I purposely am not looking at the track titles, but I'm listening to the score. The score is fantastic. Michael Giacchino's. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the full score. I know they've released some of the tracks. Yeah. It's good. Like, I know a lot of people made fun of it sounding like the Imperial March, since we're talking about John Williams.
It does sound like the Imperial March a bit, which is fine. But also, it's really an orchestral version of that Nirvana song.
Yeah.
The Something in the Way song, which is probably exactly what Matt Reeves requested, and he got it, and it's cool.
There's a reason that the song blends so well into the theme in the trailer, you know?
I mean, that's the thing I'm looking most forward to be honest. The Nirvana vibe. I mean, Bruce is talking about how it's influenced by the Nirvana perspective. What a tortured soul Kurt Cobain is among, the great tortured souls in pop culture history. And so I want to see a lot of that. Not saying it has to be Batman the Rock grunge musical, but to have those things informed.
I would see that.
Yeah, exactly. But
I would love to see that.
Right, the style of that to pervade this whole 3-hour movie.
Oh, that's right. It is 3 hours. I forgot about that.
Yeah, which is like, fine. What else do you have to do? If you're freaking going to see the Batman movie, you're there to see the Batman movie, right? You're not there to see this, like, you don't need it to be like some compact 90-minute piece of entertainment.
True.
What else do you have to do?
Although, now that you mentioned it, I did forget it was 3 hours long. And, part of the reason I'm avoiding, like, trailers and I've seen the teaser trailer and the official trailer. I think those are the only like main trailers. But you know how they release like TV spots, and then like when the actors go on talk shows, there's like a full on clip where it's a full scene from the. I'm trying to not watch any of those just because I want to. A lot of times you just feel like, oh, I've seen this. Like I remember when we saw Eternals at the theater, I was like, oh, I can go to the bathroom because I saw this scene on like.
Yeah, that's true.
The Late Show, you know what I mean? So I can just go to the bathroom when Icarus is on screen or whatever. But here I want to be able to take it all in. But now that you mentioned it's 3 hours long, if I did see a 30-second clip, that's like 1/100th of the movie. So I guess I'm good. I don't need to like feel like I've seen the whole thing.
I have been watching the clips. They're not spoiling the whole set pieces or the big events.
But the vibe, right? That's the thing.
They're just giving you tastes of the vibe.
But that's what I want. That's what I want to get the vibe in the theater, right? I don't want to know what the vibe is going in. And I did see a couple interviews. Like I said, Mike Manalo on the Nerds of Color has been doing the Batman coverage, and he interviewed John Turturro, Andy Serkis, Paul Dano, and Jeffrey Wright. And so in editing those interviews, I did hear some things about, like, just their takes on the characters and the vibe of the movie. And apparently something happens in the first 5 minutes that's just like, oh, this is not your typical Batman movie. So even that, I'm like, shit. Now I gotta... I've found out. I have to anticipate something in the first 5 minutes of this movie. I mean, it sounds stupid, and, I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. But, like, I just wanted to discover that.
Yes.
Going in. You know what I'm saying?
Movies should be. It's a good problem to have. I get that.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the Batman. What's a nerd poppin', Brittany?
I feel like there's nothing new this week, and I'm behind on my reading as always, so... I guess I have nothing this week.
Nothing's nerd popping. Anything for you, Dominic?
Well, I was just going to bring up the nerd popping question of whether to go to Comic-Con or not this year. Is that happening again, San Diego?
I don't think they've made any announcements.
I feel like I've been getting some emails explored, like suggesting that it will come back in some... Well, I want to say original state. I mean,
I guess we defeated COVID, right? Like, they're lifting mask mandates. I think my kid's going back to school next week with no mask. I mean, she's going to keep her mask on. She's like, I'm not taking my mask off, Dad. But the schools
just to be
are
clear,
like, no
keep
mask.
speaking ironically. We know we did not defeat COVID. but I was asking if you knew anything about that, because actually that would be a huge symbol of having quote unquote defeated COVID, because basically San Diego Comic-Con is precisely the kind of massive shoulder-to-shoulder event that would be the last thing to come back, right? The last thing that would be safe to do.
But there have been conventions, like, I mean, not to the extent of San Diego.
But there's something about that one that's just, I don't know, just so up against people. I guess they would control that, and yeah, I mean... Right,
if it were to come back. I mean, well, for one, it did come back, right? There was the whole Thanksgiving one last year. But I think even if it came back in July or whatever it would happen in the summer, it would, like, to your point, have some, like, social distancing. I think, and, maybe not all the studios show up, right? So there will be...
Yeah, they've been trending out of that anyway.
And you're right, exactly. Like, the big studios are like, we have our own Comic-Cons now, right? Like D23 or whatever it is, so...
Okay, I was just asking in case you knew anything about that.
I mean, fandom. Would I be interested? Is, like, does DC move fandom into, like, a real... Or do they just keep... Like, I like the virtual nature of fandom, honestly. Right? It kind of, like... You get the same experience of, like... That was the wild thing to me about fandom, is that having been in the Hall H for the Warner Brothers DC presentation, essentially, fandom gives you that same experience, except you don't have to camp out overnight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. And that's a behavior that was adapted. I guess, I know, in a sentimental way, I was just going, will that ever... return to its original state, that Comic-Con thing, or is that totally never going back to its original state?
I don't know. I mean, it would be a nice thing to come back.
But if it does happen this year, I don't know. I'm waiting for Pierce the Veil to announce their solo tour, so that's my, like, priority over Comic-Con.
That would be your proof that COVID is over, right?
Okay, well, no, because they have a new album coming out, and then they are doing the When We Are Young festival, which I did not end up getting tickets to, because just in case it turns out to be like a Friar Festival thing, I don't want to be upset that I spent all this money for an emo fest. So I'm hoping Pierce the Veil will have their own solo tour and not just playing that, because if they're only playing that, then I'm going to be really sad. But, yeah. They're from San Diego, that's why I mentioned it too. So
I see. I was like, what's the connection to Comic?
And I've only been to their hometown show once, and I would like to do it again, so that's what I'm kind of hoping, like...
I see.
Yeah.
Nerd popping for me, the only thing is, I think I mentioned it earlier, Michael Keaton, it's an Instagram post of Michael Keaton, his Batman silhouette, and that was the coolest thing that happened to me this week. So, yeah, real week. I mean, also and the Batman, right? Like I'm checking out the Batman this week, and that's
you're going to see the early IMAX.
I'm going to see the IMAX screening on Tuesday. Cool. And then the movie comes out for everyone else on Friday. And this isn't like a special. I mean, I think they released tickets in IMAX for an early showing, so we'll see. I mean. Yeah, I mean it's one of them things where like every time there's a Batman movie, I've to date not missed a Batman movie in the theater. Like from 89 to now, I've seen every Batman. I think on opening day, or if not earlier, I've seen every Batman movie. And even the Suicide Squad. Or not the Suicide Squad, but like the first Suicide Squad that Batman was in. Does that count as that counts as an Affleck Batman movie? He was in it for a scene and a half.
He is in that first Suicide Squad movie, right?
So. All right. Brittany, how can people find you on the internet?
You can find me at Hi Brittany Monet, or you can check out my podcast at Naomi Podcast, where you can get the Naomi Podcast, the Lituation feed, and the back catalog of Black Lightning Podcast. That's all I've got going.
Dominic, how can people find you?
I'm Dominic Ma. On Instagram or Twitter, I'm Dom Ma, DOMMAH.
You can find me on Twitter at @TheRealChow, _real_Chow, and follow me on Instagram at RealKeithChow. Follow the Nerds of Color at the Nerds of Color, and go to hardknockmedia.com to find this and all of the podcasts in the Hard Knock family. Give us a rating and a review if you do. You can watch our videos at youtube.com/the Nerds of Color, including this week we're dropping Mike's interviews with the cast of The Batman. And go to patreon.com/Nerds of Color to support us there. You can also support us by going to go.goalie.com/hardknock and purchase goalie gummies. We haven't been doing the ad reads, but you can still purchase goalie gummies at goalie.com. You either go to go.goalie.com or just use the code HARDNOC, HARDNOC, and get you some goalie gummies. And until next time.
Have you ever seen Edward Cullen and Bruce Wayne in the same room?
I mean, he's got a thing for bats, I've heard.